Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 261, The Skater. Thank you again to Mélanie Méthot, who allowed me to use her blog as a basis for this episode. I'll add a link to the notes for her website, thebigamyproject.com. Frederick Richardson had 4 marriages, 6 children, a fling with a 15-year-old that led to a 7th child, 2 divorces, 1 bigamy prosecution, a charge for wife desertion, and another charge for child maintenance. Frederick Stephen Richardson was born in 1876 in Sandhurst, Victoria, now known as Bendigo, to Thomas Richardson and Mary Flynn. He was a middle child of 3. On the 31st of May 1901, in Longreach, Queensland, Frederick, at the age of 25, married Amelia Bertha Guy, who was 23. They had 4 children. On the 17th of April 1913, in the Brisbane Courier in Queensland, says the plaintiff in her evidence stated that her husband was working as a storekeeper on a station when he married her. Afterwards he took up dairying, then he came to Brisbane and travelled for an insurance company. In November 1908, after they'd gone to live at Ipswich, he disappeared and his whereabouts were not discovered for 3 years. He was then traced to Melbourne. Since he left, she'd had to support herself and her children. After the bigamy proceedings were instituted, she saw him in the Melbourne jail and he told her that during the 3 years of his disappearance, he was touring Queensland with a theatrical company and he intended to return to Queensland. 6 years after their marriage, on the 3rd of December 1907 in the Brisbane Courier, Tonight, Centennial Hall, second night of the Great Skating Carnival. Professor Richardson and G. De Silva in their endurance race of 5 days and 6 nights. And then on the 6th of December 1907, 3 days later, in the Brisbane Telegraph, the following are the respective distances covered by the 2 skaters, Professor Richardson of Victoria and De Silva of Queensland. De Silva was 31 miles behind yesterday morning, but during the day pulled up considerably. He'd covered 120 miles without once taking off his skates, and at 10:30am was still going. Both men are doing well. Richardson is taking more sleep than De Silva, and the latter's knee has had to receive attention. And then on the 9th of December 1907, in the Brisbane Telegraph, endurance skating, Richardson wins the match. This week's endurance skating test between Mrs. Richardson, Victoria, and De Silva of Queensland was concluded on Saturday night. From a financial point of view, the match has been a failure because, with the exception of a few interested persons, the attendance has been very small. At first, it was announced that the competitors would skate for 5 days and 6 nights, with intervals of 1 hour in the course of each 12. Those conditions, however, were not carried out, but the skaters decided to skate as far as possible and not be bound by any particular time. They've skated fairly consistently, however, and at the termination of the race on Saturday evening, it was announced that Richardson had covered 353 miles to De Silva's 318 miles. So with all of her 4 children under the age of 8, Amelia returned home to Brisbane from Ipswich in 1909 to be closer to her 2 sisters and parents. After saying their goodbyes, Amelia received only 1 letter from her husband, and in it he begged money to pay his board. She complied without complaint. In December 1909, Frederick Richardson is pictured on roller skates at the Crystal Palace skating rink, and the caption says, "Fred Richardson, world's champion long-distance skater," at the finish of 430 miles, with his trainer W. Hamilton at Richmond in December 1909. On the 24th of March 1910, in the Bendigo Advertiser at the Olympia skating rink at Pall Mall, there will be an exhibition of fancy and trick skating that will be given by Mr. Fred Richardson, who is said to be the world's champion endurance and fancy skater. Mr. Richardson will act as director during the coming season. And the advertisement says private lessons by arrangement. In the Bendigo Advertiser a few days later says Olympia Skating Rink, Pall Mall. Exhibition of trick and fancy skating by Fred Richardson, world champion endurance and fancy skater. Come and see the local man skate. F. Richardson, manager. And in the Euroa Advertiser on the 10th of June 1910, fancy skating.
The management of the Euroa skating rink put on an interesting entertainment on Saturday and Monday last in the shape of an exhibition of trick and fancy skating by Professor Richardson, a champion on the wheels. His turns included tobogganing, dancing, chair jumping and pivots, the whole program meeting with the approval of a large attendance on each occasion. The attendance must have been extremely gratifying to the promoters as the hall was filled. On Monday, the professor concluded his program with a race against the manager of the rink, in which the professor, skating backwards, won easily. Another local skater aspired to lowering the professor's colours, but gave out after going but 2 rounds. Before concluding his exhibition, a high compliment was paid to the management by the professor, who stated that the floor was the best he'd met with outside of the cities. The skating craze now has the Euroa public in its grip, and a good number are present at every opening. Frederick Richardson then married Claudina Rose Alice Jenkins on the 10th of June 1911 in Hawthorn, Victoria. Frederick was 33 and Claudina was 27. On the 29th of June 1912, it was reported from Melbourne that Frederick Stephen Richardson, aged 39, a canvasser, pled guilty at the criminal court today on a charge of committing bigamy. Initially, he claimed that Amelia had divorced him, but ultimately could not explain why he believed that. He also mentioned that while he had a limited ability to support his legal wife during the time they spent together, his second wife lived comfortably enough with him. Amelia wrote a selfless letter to the judge. A Melbourne Argus journalist reported that the judge proposed to adopt an unusual course due to the fact that Mrs. Richardson had contemplated divorce proceedings, and she felt that if any sentence was imposed, it would throw a burden upon the young woman whom he'd married and who she understood was expecting to become a mother. Amelia even encouraged her husband to marry Claudina in order that she become the legal Mrs. Richardson. Justice Hood felt moved by Amelia's letter. Despite finding the bigamist's actions the cruelest wrong a man could do to a woman, Hood took the wife's recommendation seriously and demanded that Frederick divorce Amelia and marry Claudina and support his new family. So they had a daughter 12 months after they married illegally in June 1911. Frederick married Claudina officially on the 23rd of October 1913 at the Baptist Church in Camberwell. They had a second child, a son, 10 months after that marriage. They lived in Auburn at her parents' house, and she stated later that he never provided her with a home of her own and that he left her on the 19th of November 1915. So within a month of their marriage, he was with not only one but 2 women as he was working as an artist, 15-year-old fan Gladys Ruby Maud Dyson and a fellow roller rink performer Mabel Jenkins. Claudina stated that when he left on the 19th of November 1915, he refused to return. The Neglected Children's Department had to step in for Frederick and Claudina's 2 toddlers, and Claudina went to live with her father. In later divorce records, Claudina stated that she understood Frederick to have committed adultery with Gladys Ruby Dyson in December 1914 in Richmond, and that she was a machinist, and he is the father of her illegitimate child that was born on the 17th of August 1915. She also stated that he committed adultery with Mabel Jenkins in Collingwood in November and December of 1915, and they lived as man and wife for 2 months at the residence of Eva Armstrong of Richmond, a widow, and then they went to Sydney and lived there until he was arrested on the 24th of July 1916. So Claudina mentions that Gladys Dyson had an illegitimate child. Well, he subjected her to various abortion tactics that took a toll on her mind and body. An extract from an article in the Melbourne Truth on the 5th of August 1916 says, "The amours of Frederick Stephen Richardson were told before the Richmond court when the accused appeared on 2 charges, one of wife desertion and the other of deserting his illegitimate child. Richardson, who's 34, was arrested in New South Wales. He first came prominently before the public at the close of last year when he was ordered by the Richmond court to pay 10 shillings a week to support an illegitimate child, the mother of which is a single girl named Gladys Dyson, who's 21, and swore that he was the father. The girl stated in evidence that he kept company with her and got her into trouble. She also swore when she told him she was in a certain condition, he gave her a bottle of medicine and he said it would fix her up, but which she did not use. When she told him the stuff had not done what he said it would do, he produced an instrument which he allegedly used on her, once in the Richmond Park and once at the skating rink, with the object of procuring an abortion. He was unsuccessful, however, and the child was born on the 17th of August 1915. By the time Gladys Dyson discovered that he was actually seeing Mabel Jenkins, he moved on, but he left her as a secret mistress. As this is going on with these two women, he's featured in the Coliseum on the 23rd of July 1914 in Rockhampton, Queensland. Skating. A skating tea and tennis on skates with Mr. Richardson and Mr. Fraser versus Mr. J. Atherton and another. Sometime in the spring of 1915, against his wife's wishes, Frederick wanted to travel out of Victoria for a show with Mabel, insisting that their relationship would remain purely professional. Not only did he rent a room for his co-worker, he introduced her to new friends as Mrs. Richardson and lived with her periodically. When Claudina found out about Mabel, she shouted to her, "You're a dirty, filthy thing to be living with him." Gladys did everything she could to ensure that others knew Frederick Richardson was a scoundrel. In November 1915, Gladys faced Frederick in the Richmond court to extract financial support for their child, Lila May Dyson. And until December 1915, so only the first month, he did pay. In the Melbourne Truth on the 20th of November 1915, Richardson's romantic role at the Richmond rink. At the Richmond court on Wednesday, Frederick Richardson, 33 years of age, who was described by his counsel as a champion skater of Australia, surrendered to his bail to answer the charge of unlawfully deserting his illegitimate child, the offspring of Gladys Ruby Dyson. Mr. Jones, who appeared for the complainant, said the defendant was a married man and had been engaged as an instructor at the skating rink next to the Richmond police station for some years. The mother of the child, who was only 20 years of age, made his acquaintance in September 1910 when she was only 15 and kept company with him up until the end of last year. Prior to that, she'd heard he was a married man, but when she taxed him with it, he denied it. They were intimate, and when she got into a certain condition, she informed him of her trouble. He attempted to procure an abortion in order for the pregnancy to not continue. When arrested, he said he had not had anything to do with the girl for 2 years, but evidence would be brought to prove that he had been frequently in her company during the last 12 months. Gladys Ruby Dyson, the complainant, entered the witness box carrying a child, which Mr. Jones said was the dead ring of Richardson. She deposed that the defendant was the father of the child, which was born in August. Mr. Jones asked, "Were you intimate with him, knowing he was a married man?" She said, "Yes, Mrs. Triggs told me he was married, and I asked him if it was true, and he said it was not, and told me to take no notice." "When were you last with him?" "December the 10th and the 26th. Mr. Jones, for the defendant, asked, "Do you know that Richardson states that you have threatened to do this to him 2.5 years ago?" She said, "It is a lie." "Do you remember being turned out of the skating rink, meeting Elsie Brooks, and telling her that it was Richardson's doings and that you would get even with him?" "I told her something about the rink, but not that." "Did you say to Mabel Jenkins the other day, 'Yes, see, I have had Richardson arrested'?" "I told her I would do it, and you see I have carried out my threat." "Did you tell Mrs. Ballymore that you were married to a pastry cook in the city?" "Yes, but that was about 6 weeks ago." "Did you say at the skating rink that the child belonged to a fireman and that he was not home at night?" "I said something to Mrs. Triggs, but I never said who the father was of my child." "Did you ever tell the defendant he was the father of the child?" "Yes, I told him in December and asked what he intended to do." "Is it not a fact that you have been following this man for 2.5 years?" "It is a lie. He was keeping company with me up till December." "Do you remember an incident that occurred at the Brunswick skating rink?" "We went there with Mabel Jenkins and May Downs, and he saw me home." "Did May Downs not try to get rid of you and want you to go home by tram?" "Yes, and that is the only occasion that I followed him." Mr. Burgess, JP, asked, "Do you think the other girl was trying to cut you out?" She said yes. The chairman asked, "You were very fond of him then?" "I was at that time, and that was the reason I stuck to him." Mr. Jones asked, "Did you ever say that you would go with as many men as you liked and blame Richardson for the result?" She said, "No, that is a lie." "Do you know that Richardson and Mabel Jenkins have been together for 18 months?" "No." She said, "I was in Tasmania from February to March and wrote to him from there but received no reply." "You said you didn't know he was married. Wasn't he mixed up in a bigamy case?" She said, "Mrs. Trigg told me that." Mr. Jones asked, "Why did you tell people you were married?" She said, "Because I didn't want them to know my position." This closed the case for the complainant. For the defence, Mr. Jones said, the case must be dismissed as there's no corroboration of the girl's story. Richardson had been at the skating rink for 8 years, and he was the champion skater of Australia. He was in great demand with girls who wanted him to take them round the rink. The complainant, who was an assertive girl and bold, and she told a girl at the rink that she would get with him. Their worships should remember that a man who has girls in a skating rink is in a position where he's likely to be shot at by anyone. The chairman brought up there is corroboration of the girl's story as Rainford's evidence when he said that he saw them together. And George Rainford said that he knew Richardson very well and he'd seen him with the complainant. On one occasion, about a month ago, the witness was on a tram with him, and when they reached the Hawthorn Bridge, he saw the complainant on a footpath and the defendant got off the tram and joined her. On another occasion, he saw them on a tram at Flinders Street at 10:25 p.m, and he also saw them talking together. Mr. Jones asked, "How did you come into being a witness?" And he said, "I was in the court this morning and was told Richardson had got a girl into trouble. When I saw the girl, I said I tipped that." "You are not very friendly with Richardson, are you?" He said, "I won't be after this." And there was laughter in the court. Mr. Jones responded to Rainsford's statements and said that his client would swear that he's never been out with the girl and that her story from beginning to end is a fabrication. The chairman asked, when he knew he was accused by the girl of being the cause of her trouble, why didn't he go out and face her like a man? Mr. Jones responded, the first time he knew that the child was born was when he was arrested. The defendant, who is a short, dark, clean-shaven man, denied on oath that he'd been out with the complainant or it was his responsibility for the child. He'd never given her a bottle of medicine or used an instrument on her. He was astounded when he was told he was accused of being the father of the child. Mr. Jones said, "You swear that you have never been with her alone?" And the witness said, "Yes, I can prove it. For the last 2 years, a young girl and myself have been working up an act every night. There is only a break of a few nights, which I can't account for." The chairman asked, "How do you account for this girl coming here and saying what she has said if it's not true?" He said, "Over 2.5 years ago, she told me that she would go out on the streets, do what she liked and blame me for it. I told Mrs. Triggs about it at the time. At the time I said to her, I hope you are not trying to carry out that threat on me." "Who is the girl that you have been rehearsing with for the last 2 years?" He said, "Mabel Jenkins." "Hasn't Mabel's mother complained to the police about you?" He said, "Yes, because she left home. She now has given her consent for Mabel to do the act." "Is Mabel living with her mother now?" "No." "How old is she?" 20. "Where is she living now?" "In Griffith Street." "Who is paying her board?" "I am looking after the girl. I told you before we are working up a set together." Mr. Jones asked, "Are you cohabiting with your wife?" "No, but I am living in the same house with her in Auburn." "What did Mabel Jenkins's mother complain to the police about in regards to you?" And he said, "She is known as Mabel Richardson. It was a foolish mistake to make." And then there was laughter in the court. The chairman said dryly, "The girl with the baby was a foolish mistake to make." And again there was laughter. "How long have you been married?" He said, 3 years. The chairman asked, "Does your wife know that you go and see Mabel where she is living?" He said, "Yes." Mabel Jenkins said she had been rehearsing a skating set every night. Mr. Jones asked, "Do you remember Gladys Dyson in the street the other day?" The witness said, "Yes." She said, "I suppose you know I have a warrant for the arrest of Richardson." I said, "Yes." Mr. Burgess asked, "Why do you go under the name of Richardson where you are living?" She said, "Because I prefer the name." Then there was laughter. "Do you like Richardson?" She said, "Yes, very much." Again there was laughter. Elsie Brooks, a girl in her early 20s, said that 18 months ago she met Gladys Dyson outside the skating rink. The latter had been put out of the rink. She said to her, "This is Richardson's work, and I will get even with him. I made a threat, and I will keep it." Peter Triggs said that Richardson had not been in his employ for 8 months, although he came to the rink occasionally. He left on his own accord after the witness complained. He was giving too much attention. After hearing other evidence, the bench was in favour of the complainant, and payment was set for the child. Defendant also had to pay £2 and 2 shillings costs and a surety of a default or 3 months imprisonment. So a few months later, on the 6th of January 1916, in the Victoria Police Gazette, Frederick Stephen Richardson is charged on warrant with deserting his wife, Claudina Rose Ellis Richardson of Auburn, on the 4th, 40 years of age, 5 foot 6 inches high, thin build, dark hair, dark complexion, clean-shaven, dressed in a brown suit and a grey soft felt hat, supposed to have gone to Sydney. By August the 15th, 1916, Frederick faced charges not only for arrears in maintenance but also for leaving Victoria. Claudina, too, had a complaint against her husband. Weary of securing support from others, she pursued Frederick legally, since he had an obligation to maintain her. When arrested in Sydney, Frederick told the constable that he moved to New South Wales because his contract in Victoria was cancelled because of the crude newspaper article. Unlike the 1912 bigamy proceedings, Frederick did not escape prison this time. After a 10-minute deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict of wife desertion, and it resulted in a sentence of 12 months hard labour. He also served 12 months of hard labour concurrently for child maintenance arrears. With Frederick in Pentridge, Claudina divorced him and later married someone else. Almost immediately after his release, Frederick decided to marry Mabel Jenkins. But despite his fame and previous infidelity, the dancing couple stayed together without any children until Mabel passed away, leaving Frederick a very lonely man. In 1940, he passed away at the age of 64 and is buried in an unmarked plot, which he himself paid for in Randwick, New South Wales. His children were Amelia Bertha Guy. Amelia did not remarry. She continued to live in Brisbane and died on the 6th of September 1950 at the age of 72. Their first child, Irene Richardson, was born on the 8th of September 1901 in Brisbane. She married Donald McLean on the 12th of June 1918 in Queensland when she was 16 and Donald 24. They had one girl who died in 1925. Donald died in 1962 and Irene died on the 9th of March 1993 in Brisbane, aged 91. They had no other children. Ellen Elisa Galway Richardson was born on the 10th of August 1903 in Queensland. She married John Alexander Kane in Brisbane on the 14th of July 1934 when they were 30. John was a polisher and they had no children. Ellen died on the 19th of August 1975 in Brisbane, aged 72. Their third child, Frederick Stephen Richardson Jr., was born on the 2nd of April 1905 in Longreach. He married Amy Augusta Edith Bretherton on the 14th of November 1931 in Queensland. On the 6th of July 1940 in the Brisbane Courier Mail, it stated that Amy Augusta Edith Richardson of Fortitude Valley obtained from His Honour an order nisi for dissolution of her marriage with Frederick Stephen Richardson, a labourer of Woodford, on the grounds of desertion. The parties were married at Brisbane on the 14th of November 1931 and there were no children. Their actions were not defended. In June 1941, he enlisted in World War II in Brisbane. It stated he was a clerk at the time of his enlistment. At the time of his enlistment, it states that he was married to Doris Thelma Kane. On the 27th of February 1985, there was a letter written to the Army Records. Dear Sir, we've received application for membership from Mr. Keith Kane, stepson of Mr. Frederick Stephen Richardson. Frederick Richardson Jr. died on the 22nd of August 1968 in Brisbane at the age of 63. The fourth child was Cecil John Richardson, who was born on the 24th of January 1908 in Brisbane. He married Rosina Olive. In Brisbane on the 5th of December 1933, Cecil John Richardson, 24, carpenter, chose the rear of a hotel at the Valley as a venue for an illegal betting business and was fined £10 in default, a month's jail. And on the 3rd of March 1941 in the Brisbane Telegraph, Cecil John Richardson, 33, minor of the Valley, pled guilty in the police court today to a summons charge that between the 21st of February and the 3rd of March at the Hotel Wickham in the Valley, he used a common betting house. A probationary constable was sent to the hotel and he made bets with Richardson. Police raided the hotel and Richardson denied that he'd made bets with the constable, but a marked coin which the constable had given him for a bet was found in his possession. His counsel said that Richardson had turned to betting to see if he could make some money to support his wife and family. He was convicted and fined £20 in default, 40 days imprisonment. A charge against Richardson that he kept a common gaming house was withdrawn when no evidence was offered. And Cecil died on the 6th of June 1958 in Brisbane, aged only 50. His children with Claudina Rose Alice Jenkins. Firstly, Claudina married William Brand in Victoria in 1922. He was an insurance agent, and Claudina died on the 16th of December 1950 at the age of 64. They had Freda May Richardson on the 25th of June 1912 in Auburn. She was committed into state care on the 17th of March 1916. It stated in the records that Frederick Richardson deserted his family in November 1915, saying he was going on a skating tour. He's the father of Lilia Dyson, who's also in state care, and has a warrant issued. The mother, Claudina Rosa Alice Richardson of Auburn, it says poor, but then it says and of good character. Then it does say the same day that Freda was admitted into state care, she was given to her mother at Hawthorn. Freda was an artist and married Alan Warren in Victoria in 1939 when she was 27 and Alan was 20. Alan was an art teacher and they were living in Sydney in 1980. The second child, Claude Hubert, was born on the 29th of June 1914 in Auburn. He was a clerk and enlisted in World War II on the 18th of June 1940 and served in the Middle East, Palestine and Ceylon. He was discharged in October 1945. He lived with his mother and stepfather until he married Marjorie Mead in Victoria in 1949 when he was 35 and Marjorie 29. They had a daughter, Wendy, but she died in 1950. On the 2nd of April 1953, in the Melbourne Age, it says, notice is hereby given that the partnership consisting between Percy William Butterworth and Claude Hilbert Richardson, carrying on a business as laundryman in Caulfield, has been dissolved and Claude Hilbert Richardson will continue to carry on the business. In 1972, Claude was farming at Dramana in Victoria. The next child, Lila Mae Dyson. Just a little bit of background on Gladys. Gladys Ruby Maud Dyson was born in Hobart, Tasmania in 1894. She was 18 years younger than Frederick and was 20 when she gave birth to Lila on the 17th of August 1915. Gladys went on to marry William Sharp, a decorator in Victoria in 1931, and she died on the 14th of June 1938 in Campbellfield, Victoria, aged only 43. Lila married George James Poole in 1935 in Victoria when she was 20 and George 22. They had two children, Beverly Gladys, whose married name was Bainbridge, who died on the 3rd of November 2018, and Robert, who was born on the 25th of July 1940 and died on the 24th of December 2017 in Dandenong, Victoria. Frederick had a brother, Robert Percival Septimus Richardson, who was born in 1883 in Emerald Hill in Victoria. In 1909, Robert was working as an estate agent in Melbourne. He married Barbara Elizabeth Dobby in 1910 in Victoria. From 1913, he was working as a clerk and they lived in Fitzroy. On the 14th of July 1915, he enlisted in World War I but did not embark. He enlisted again on the 10th of February 1917, fought in France and was promoted to sergeant in May 1919. He returned to Australia in July 1919. Robert Percival Septimus Richardson featured in the New South Wales Police Gazette as he was inquired for by the New South Wales Police. His description was 38 years old, about 5 foot 7.5 inches high, medium build, dark complexion, black hair, clean shaven with blue-grey eyes, a straight nose slightly turned up at the tip, very affected in speech and manner, a returned soldier, a clerk by occupation, generally wears a grey suit and a soft grey felt hat. And then on the 14th of September 1921, in Sydney, a warrant's been issued by the Children's Court Bench for the arrest of Robert Percival Septimus Richardson, charged with wife desertion, and the complainant was Barbara Elizabeth Richardson of Kensington. I hope you enjoyed the story of Frederick Richardson, the skater and the bigamist.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.